Keep quiet. The human maid hid the vampire prince's secret after she saw his eyes turn red. The blood dripped from his chin onto the marble floor, his eyes blazing crimson as he held the lifeless body of the palace guard. And when he turned to see me frozen in the doorway with fresh linens in my trembling arms, I knew I should scream. But instead, I heard myself whisper the two words that would change everything. I won't tell. Wait, before the next revelation happens. If this mystery has already captivated you, let us know where you're following this story from. To make sure you don't miss any unexpected alliances or awakened powers, subscribe and join our circle. The game is about to change. Now, back to the scene. The Prince of Valtheria dropped the body with a sickening thud. The guard, Thomas, I think his name was, crumpled like discarded parchment. Prince Adrian's chest heaved, his fine silk shirt torn and stained. The crimson glow in his eyes flickered, then dimmed, returning to their usual icy blue. But the evidence remained. Blood on his mouth, fangs still visible beneath his parted lips, and a corpse at his feet in his private chambers. We stared at each other across the expanse of his bedchamber. The linen slipped from my arms, white fabric billowing to the floor like surrendering flags. I had been a maid in the palace for 3 years, invisible as wallpaper, and in all that time, I had never been noticed by royalty. Now, the crown prince looked at me as if I were the only person in the world. "You should run," he said, his voice hoarse. "Scream, call the guards." I should have. Any sensible person would have. But I had seen something in that split second before he dropped the body. Something that made me pause. The guard's hand was wrapped around a silver dagger, its blade coated with a substance that gleamed with an unnatural sheen. And on the prince's side, barely visible through his torn shirt, was a wound that had already begun to heal, but must have been agony moments before. "He attacked you first," I said, surprised by the steadiness in my voice. Prince Adrian's eyes widened. You're not afraid?" "I'm terrified," I admitted, and it was true. My heart hammered against my ribs so hard I thought it might break through. But I'm also not blind. That dagger is poisoned, silverwood extract, if I'm not mistaken, used by vampire hunters. The prince's expression shifted from shock to something else, calculation, perhaps, or curiosity. He took a step toward me, and I forced myself not to retreat. I had already made my choice, though I couldn't explain why. "How does a common maid know about vampire hunters?" he asked. "How does a prince of Valtheria expect to hide his true nature when he leaves bodies in his chambers?" I countered. "This isn't the first guard to die mysteriously in this wing, is it?" He stopped mid-step. For a long moment, we stood in silence, the only sound the distant chiming of the palace clock tower. Midnight, the witching hour. How fitting. "What's your name?" he asked finally. "Ilara, Your Highness. I work in the West Wing. This was my first time assigned to your chambers." I gestured helplessly at the linens on the floor. "Mrs. Thornbury sent me because the usual girl took ill." "Convenient," Prince Adrian murmured. "Or perhaps fate. Do you believe in fate, Ilara?" "I believe in choices," I said, "and right now I'm choosing not to sound the alarm. But that body won't stay hidden for long. The guard rotation changes in an hour." The prince's lips curved into something that wasn't quite a smile. "Practical. I appreciate that." He moved to a large wardrobe and pulled out a heavy canvas tarp. "Help me." I should have refused, should have run, should have done anything but step forward and help the vampire prince wrap a dead body in canvas. But my hands moved of their own accord, and together we worked in grim silence. The guard was heavier than he looked, dead weight dragging at my arms as we maneuvered him into the tarp. "There's a servant's passage," I said, keeping my voice low, "behind the eastern tapestry. It leads to the old wine cellar. No one goes there anymore since the new cellars were built. We could—" "We?" Prince Adrian interrupted. "You're planning to help me dispose of a body?" I met his gaze directly. "I'm planning to keep us both alive, Your Highness. If he's found here, you hang for murder. And if you hang, what do you think happens to the lowly maid who was in your chambers at the time? They'll assume I was your accomplice, or your victim. Either way, I don't survive the week." He studied me with those unsettling blue eyes, and I wondered what he saw. I was nobody, 22 years old, plain-featured, with brown hair always tucked beneath my maid's cap, and a face that strangers forgot within minutes of meeting me. I was invisible, which had always been a blessing in the palace, where being noticed by the wrong people could be dangerous. But now, this prince saw me, really saw me. "You're smarter than you look," he said. "I'd have to be, to survive 3 years in this nest of vipers," I replied. "Now, are we moving this body, or shall we stand here debating until the morning shift finds us?" A genuine smile crossed his face then, transforming his features from coldly handsome to something almost human. Almost, but the blood still staining his collar reminded me exactly what he was. Together, we dragged the body through the hidden passage I'd mentioned. The tapestry, a faded depiction of some ancient battle, concealed a narrow door that opened with a soft click. The passage beyond was dark and dusty, clearly unused for years. Perfect. "How do you know about these passages?" the prince asked, as we navigated the cramped space, the wrapped body between us. "Servants know everything about a palace," I said. "We're the ones who built it, maintained it, and died in it. These passages were meant for discreet comings and goings. Now they're just forgotten. The wine cellar was exactly as I remembered from my early days in the palace, when I'd explored everywhere I wasn't supposed to be. Cool, dark, filled with empty racks and broken casks. We laid the body in a far corner behind a collapsed shelf. "This buys us time," I said, brushing dust from my hands. "A day, maybe 2. Then we need a better plan." "We," the prince said again, watching me in the dim light filtering through a high grated window. "You keep saying we. Why are you doing this?" I considered lying, considered giving him some noble reason, or claiming I was under his spell. But something about standing in a dark cellar with a vampire prince who had just committed murder demanded honesty. "Because 3 years ago, my brother was hanged for stealing bread," I said quietly. "He was guilty. He did steal it. Our mother was dying, and we had no money for food or medicine. He stole 1 loaf from the palace kitchens, and they hanged him in the square while I watched. The prince who ordered it, your older brother, Crown Prince Marcus, he laughed while my brother choked on the rope." Prince Adrian's expression darkened. "Marcus is a sadist. Marcus is heir to the throne," I corrected. "You're the spare, the disappointment, the younger son who's never quite good enough." I met his eyes. "I've heard the servants talk. They say you're weak, that you spend your time reading books instead of learning to rule, that you disappear for days and return looking like death itself." "They're not wrong," he said quietly. "They're not right either," I replied. "You're not weak, you're hiding. And that guard tonight, he wasn't the first to try to kill you, was he?" The prince leaned against the stone wall, suddenly looking exhausted. In the pale moonlight, I could see dark circles under his eyes, the sharp angles of his face more pronounced than they should be. When had he last fed properly? When had he last slept? "There's a faction in the court," he said finally. "They know what I am. Not many, but enough. They want me dead before I can claim any power. My father, the king, doesn't know I'm what I am. My mother." He stopped, pain flashing across his features. "My mother was like me. She died when I was 12. Officially, it was a wasting sickness. Unofficially, it was a silver-poisoned arrow from a hunter's bow. And your brother, Marcus? Fully human, as is my father. I inherited this curse from my mother's bloodline." He laughed bitterly. "The noble house of Ravencroft. They say we're descended from the old ones, the first vampires who walked in the age of legends. My mother hid it well, but I'm not as skilled at pretending to be human." "Is that why you never attend the dawn ceremonies?" I asked. "The servants notice. They think you're arrogant or lazy." "Better they think me lazy than see me burn in the sunlight," he said dryly. "Though I can tolerate brief exposure, especially in winter. It's not the instant death from children's tales, but it weakens me, makes me vulnerable. And hungry?" I guessed. He nodded slowly. "I try to control it. I feed on criminals, those already condemned to death. I tell myself it's merciful, a quick death instead of the hangman's noose. But tonight, I hadn't fed in 2 weeks. I was weak, and that guard, he knew it. He waited until I was vulnerable, then attacked." "Someone sent him," I said. "Someone who knows your patterns, your weaknesses." "Yes," the prince agreed, "and they won't stop with one failed attempt." We stood in silence for a moment, the weight of the situation settling over us like a shroud. I had committed myself now. There was no going back. "We need to find out who's behind this," I said. "And we need to keep you fed and strong, or the next assassin will succeed." "You say that as if you're planning to stay," Prince Adrian said, pushing away from the wall. "Ilara, you should run. Leave the palace tonight. I can give you money, a horse." "And go where?" I interrupted. "I have no family left, no prospects. I'm a maid with no references who would immediately be suspected of fleeing a crime scene. No, Your Highness, we're bound together now, whether we like it or not." He stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Resignation, perhaps, or determination. When he spoke, his voice was formal, laden with weight. "Then I propose an alliance," he said. "You help me survive these assassination attempts and uncover who's behind them. In return, I protect you. No one in this palace will touch you. You'll have my word as a prince of Valtheria." "And what good is a prince's word when that prince might not survive the month?" I asked. "Then you'll have my word as a vampire," he said quietly, "which is binding in ways human oaths are not. We are bound to our promises, Ilara. It's part of our nature. If I swear to protect you, I will do so or die trying." I considered this. Everything in my life had taught me not to trust nobility, not to believe in their promises. They spoke sweetly and acted cruelly. They forgot servants as soon as they'd used them. But something in Prince Adrian's eyes, ancient and weary and desperate, told me he meant every word. "Then I accept your alliance," I said. "But we do this as equals. I'm not your servant in this. I'm your partner." He extended his hand, pale and long-fingered in the moonlight. When I took it, his skin was cold as marble, but his grip was firm. Something passed between us in that moment, a spark, a connection, a recognition of 2 souls equally damned by circumstance. "Partners," he agreed, "though this may be the strangest partnership in the history of Valtheria." "Strange times call for strange alliances," I said. "Now, we should return before we're missed. Can you clean yourself up without raising suspicion?" "I have practice," he said dryly. "Being a vampire prince requires certain skills in discretion." We navigated back through the servants' passage, moving silently through the darkness. When we emerged into his chambers again, the room looked almost normal, except for the bloodstains on the floor where the body had fallen. "I'll clean that," I said automatically, already calculating what I'd need. Cold water for fresh blood. I'll say I spilled the washing bucket. "Ilara," the prince said, catching my arm as I moved toward the door. His hand was still cold through my sleeve. "Thank you. I don't know why you're doing this, but thank you." I looked up at him, this impossible creature who was prince and monster, and somehow increasingly human in my eyes. "Don't thank me yet," I said. "We have a long road ahead. Now, let me get cleaning supplies before someone comes looking for me." I slipped out of his chambers and hurried through the corridors, my mind racing. What had I done? I'd allied myself with a vampire, helped dispose of a body, and committed myself to a conspiracy that could end with both our heads on spikes. And yet, as I gathered buckets and brushes from the servants' quarters, I felt more alive than I had in 3 years. Since my brother's death, I'd been a ghost in this palace, going through the motions of living without truly being present. Now, suddenly, I had purpose. Dangerous, potentially fatal purpose, but purpose nonetheless. Mrs. Thornbury, the head housekeeper, barely glanced up when I passed her in the hallway. "Finished with the prince's chambers?" "Spilled the washing water," I lied smoothly, going back to clean it up. She waved me away dismissively. Perfect. No one cared about a clumsy maid. When I returned to Prince Adrian's rooms, he had changed his clothes and washed the blood from his face. In fresh black velvet, with his dark hair combed back, he looked every inch the royal prince. Only the slight pallor of his skin and the darkness under his eyes hinted at his true nature. "The guard's absence will be noted by dawn," he said as I scrubbed at the bloodstains. "We need a story." "Say you dismissed him," I suggested. "Sent him on an errand to the eastern estates. By the time anyone thinks to question it, we'll have bought ourselves time to investigate. And if they ask me directly? Then you say he was unsatisfactory, caught him sleeping on duty. It's a prince's prerogative to dismiss incompetent guards." I sat back on my heels, examining my work. The stain was fading. Good. "You need to act normally tomorrow. Attend your regular duties. Show no sign that anything is wrong." "I'm supposed to attend a council meeting at noon," he said. "Father wants to discuss the spring planting and taxation issues." "Then attend it. Be your usual disinterested self." I stood, wringing out the bloody cloth into the bucket. "I'll use my position to listen to the servants' gossip. They see everything in this palace. If someone's plotting against you, the servants will know." "You're taking a significant risk," Prince Adrian said quietly. "If we're discovered—" "We won't be," I said with more confidence than I felt. "Not if we're careful. Not if we trust each other." He nodded slowly. "I'm not accustomed to trusting humans. We're taught from a young age that your kind is treacherous, that you'll betray us at the first opportunity. And we're taught that vampires are monsters who drink children's blood and kill without remorse," I countered. "Yet here we are, proving the legends wrong." I picked up my bucket and brushes. "I should go. Dawn will break soon, and you need to rest. Can you sleep, or do you—" "I sleep," he assured me, "though not as much as humans. A few hours will suffice." "Then sleep, Your Highness. I'll return tomorrow evening with whatever information I can gather." I paused at the door. "And, Prince Adrian, try not to kill anyone else in the meantime." His laugh followed me into the corridor, a sound so unexpected and genuine that it made me smile despite everything. I had partnered with a vampire prince. I had helped hide a murder. I had committed treason in all but name. And somehow, I had never felt more certain that I was exactly where I was supposed to be. The next day passed in a blur of mundane tasks laced with subtle investigation. I moved through the palace as I always did, invisible, unnoticed, just another maid in a sea of servants. But now I listened with new purpose. In the kitchens, cook's assistant Mary gossiped about seeing unusual movements in the East Wing. 3 men in dark cloaks, she whispered to another maid, meeting with someone important. Couldn't see who, but they had the look of sellswords about them. In the laundry, old Agnes mentioned that Lord Blackwood had been asking questions about the prince's habits, wanted to know when His Highness typically retires for the evening. What business is it of his, I wonder? In the stables, young Thomas, not the dead guard, another Thomas, spoke of seeing torches in the old watchtower at odd hours. Place has been abandoned for years, he said, but lately there's lights up there after midnight. I collected these threads of information like a weaver gathering wool, storing each detail away for later. By evening, when I returned to Prince Adrian's chambers with fresh linens, I had much to report. He was standing by the window when I entered, staring out at the darkening sky. He had the look of a predator waiting for night to hunt, beautiful and terrible in equal measure. "I have news," I said softly, closing the door behind me. He turned, and I saw hunger in his eyes, not for blood, though perhaps that too, but for information, for hope. "Tell me." I recounted everything I'd learned. With each revelation, his expression grew darker. "Blackwood," he said when I finished. "I should have known. He's been positioning himself for years, gathering support among the nobles. He wants Marcus on the throne because he can control my brother. But me?" He smiled without humor. "I'm unpredictable, dangerous, everything he despises." "Is he the one who knows what you are?" I asked. "Possibly. Or he suspects and is testing his theories." The prince began to pace, his movements graceful despite his tension. "The watchtower meetings concern me most. If he's gathering hunters, then we need to disrupt his plans," I said. "Learn what he's plotting and counter it." "How do you propose we do that?" I had been thinking about this all day, turning possibilities over in my mind like stones in a stream. "I can access places you can't," I said slowly. "I'm a servant. I'm invisible. I can enter Blackwood's chambers, search his correspondence, find evidence of his conspiracy." "Absolutely not," Prince Adrian said flatly. "If you're caught—" "If I'm caught," I interrupted, "but I won't be caught. I know the palace schedules. I know when Blackwood attends council meetings, when he dines, when he takes his evening constitutional. I can slip in and out without anyone noticing." "Ilara, we agreed to be partners," I reminded him. "That means we both take risks. You can't protect me by keeping me locked away from danger. We're already in danger. At least let me be useful." He stopped pacing and turned to face me fully. In the fading light, his eyes seemed to hold shadows within shadows, ancient depths that had seen more than I could imagine. "You're the strangest human I've ever met," he said finally. "I'll take that as a compliment," I replied. "Now, do we have a plan, or are we going to stand here debating until Blackwood has you assassinated?" A slow smile crossed his face. "We have a plan. But you'll need help accessing Blackwood's quarters. They're in the north wing, heavily guarded." "Then you'll create a distraction," I said. "Something that draws attention away from that wing." "What kind of distraction?" I thought for a moment, then grinned. "How do you feel about having a very public argument with your brother?" The plan was risky, but all our options were risks now. The next afternoon, I positioned myself in the servants' corridor that ran parallel to the main hall. Through a grated vent, I could see into the grand space below where nobles gathered before the evening meal. Prince Adrian entered first, dressed in his usual black and silver, looking every inch the bored younger prince. His brother, Crown Prince Marcus, arrived moments later with his entourage of sycophants and admirers. Marcus was everything Adrian wasn't: golden-haired, broad-shouldered, loud and commanding. He was also, from what I'd observed, utterly devoid of anything resembling intelligence or compassion. "Adrian," Marcus called out, his voice carrying across the hall. "Surprised to see you awake at this hour. Don't you usually spend afternoons sleeping off whatever debauchery you engaged in the night before?" The gathered nobles tittered. Adrian's expression remained neutral, but I saw the slight tension in his shoulders. "Good evening, brother," Adrian said coolly. "I see your wit remains as sharp as ever. By which I mean not at all." The tittering stopped. Marcus's face flushed red. "What did you say to me?" "I said you're boring," Adrian continued, his voice carrying a note of boredom. "You're the most tedious person in this entire palace, which is saying something considering we house over 300 people, most of whom have the personality of wet stone." It was brilliant. Marcus couldn't let such an insult stand, not in front of his supporters. And Adrian, usually so quiet and withdrawn, was suddenly the center of attention. "You dare," Marcus sputtered. "I dare quite a lot, actually," Adrian interrupted. "I dare to read books. I dare to think thoughts more complex than crush, kill, tax. I dare to question whether hanging starving boys for stealing bread is really the hallmark of good governance." I saw it in Marcus's eyes, the moment he snapped. He lunged at his brother, hands reaching for Adrian's throat. The nobles gasped and scattered. Guards rushed forward to intervene. In seconds, the entire hall was in chaos. It was perfect. I slipped away from my vantage point and hurried through the servants' passages toward the north wing. As I'd predicted, the guards who normally stood watch at Blackwood's corridor had rushed to help break up the royal altercation. I had minutes at most. Blackwood's chambers were exactly what I expected: opulent, cold, and organized with military precision. I moved quickly through his sitting room to the study beyond. His desk was covered with papers, all neatly stacked. I rifled through them with practiced efficiency. Land deeds, tax records, a letter from his sister. Nothing useful. I was about to check the drawers when I heard footsteps in the corridor outside. My heart hammered. I couldn't be caught here. I ducked behind a heavy curtain just as the door opened. "Complete disgrace," Lord Blackwood's voice cut through the room. "The princes fighting like common brawlers in front of the entire court." "It plays to our advantage," another voice said, a woman's voice, cultured and cold. "Lady Ashford, if I wasn't mistaken. Adrian shows himself to be exactly what we've claimed: unstable, dangerous, unfit for any position of power." "The boy is more than unfit," Blackwood said. "He's an abomination. His mother was a monster, and he carries her tainted blood." My breath caught. They knew. They definitely knew. "The king still refuses to hear it," Lady Ashford said. "He loved Queen Helena too much to accept the truth about what she was." "Then we make him see it," Blackwood replied. "We force Adrian to reveal his true nature in a way that cannot be denied." The full moon is in 3 days. With the right encouragement, even Adrian's control will slip. "The spring festival," Lady Ashford breathed. "The entire court will be gathered. If he transforms in front of everyone, then not even his father can protect him," Blackwood finished. "Marcus will be confirmed as the sole heir, and we'll have the pliable future king we need. All we need is the right catalyst." "The hunter I hired arrives tomorrow," the woman said. "He'll know how to provoke the reaction we need. These creatures are slaves to their hunger. Deny them blood for long enough, present them with the right temptation, and they become the monsters we claim they are, Blackwood agreed. Perfect. Now come. We should return before our absence is noted. I remained frozen behind the curtain as they left, my mind racing. 3 days. We had 3 days to prevent whatever they were planning. I waited several long minutes to ensure they wouldn't return, then slipped out of the chambers and back through the servants' passages. My hands were shaking. A hunter. The spring festival. Some kind of trap to force Adrian to reveal himself in front of the entire court. I found the prince in his chambers, nursing a split lip from his fight with Marcus. When he saw my face, he immediately stood. What happened? I told him everything. With each word, his expression grew grimmer. They're going to try to make me lose control at the festival, he said when I finished. Force me to attack someone in front of witnesses. Can they do that? I asked. Can they make you lose control? He was silent for a long moment. If I'm weak enough, hungry enough, if they find the right trigger, he looked away. Yes, they can. Then we make sure you're strong, I said firmly. We find a way to feed you safely, and we stay one step ahead of their plan. Elara, you don't understand, he said, and there was despair in his voice. At the spring festival, there will be hundreds of people. If I lose control in that crowd, if I kill someone, anyone, they'll burn me alive in the square, and you'll burn beside me for helping me. Then we won't let that happen, I said. We're partners, remember? We face this together. He looked at me then with such intensity that I felt it like a physical touch. Why? He asked. Why are you doing this? Really? I could have given him another practical answer, could have talked about survival and mutual benefit, but standing there in his chambers, with conspiracy swirling around us and death approaching with each passing day, I found myself telling the truth. Because you saw me, I said quietly. In 3 years in this palace, you're the first person to actually see me. Not as a servant or a tool or an obstacle, but as a person. And because when you killed that guard, you didn't make excuses. You didn't claim divine right or noble privilege. You accepted responsibility. You were more human in that moment than any human I've met in this cursed place. Prince Adrian stared at me for a long moment, and I saw something shift in his expression. Surprise, vulnerability, something almost like hope. I see you, Elara, he said softly. I have since that first night. You're brave and clever and impossibly stubborn. You should be terrified of me, but instead you're planning strategy. You should hate all nobles after what happened to your brother, but you chose to help me anyway. He paused, seeming to search for words. You're extraordinary. No one had ever called me extraordinary. I felt heat rise to my cheeks. We should focus on the plan, I said, trying to regain my equilibrium. You need to feed before the festival, strong enough that whatever they try won't work. And where do you propose I find willing donors? He asked dryly. I can't exactly post a notice in the marketplace. Vampire prince seeking blood donors, apply within. No, I agreed, but there are other options. The dungeon, for instance. There are always prisoners condemned to death. They're guarded, he said, and the executioner keeps careful count. If prisoners start dying before their scheduled executions, questions will be asked. I thought about this, turning possibilities over in my mind. What about the prisoners scheduled for execution tomorrow? If you fed on them the night before, they'd simply be found dead in their cells. Natural causes. Happens all the time in the dungeon. And how do I access the dungeon without being seen? The same way we moved the body, I said. Servant passages. There's a forgotten tunnel that leads from the old watchtower. Yes, the same one Blackwood is using for his meetings, down to the dungeon levels. It was meant as an escape route in case of siege. Now it's just a dusty hole most people don't know exists. Adrian looked at me with something like wonder. How do you know all of this? I told you, servants know everything. I moved to his window, looking out at the palace grounds. Tomorrow night, I'll meet you at the base of the old watchtower, midnight. I'll show you the passage, and you can feed safely. You're going to be my guide to murder, he said, and I couldn't tell if he was appalled or impressed. I'm going to be your partner in survival, I corrected. There's a difference. Those prisoners are already condemned. You're simply expediting the process. A moral technicality. Perhaps, I acknowledged. But we're beyond morals now, aren't we? We're in the realm of necessity, and necessity is a harsh mistress. He laughed, a sound without humor. You should have been a philosopher, not a maid. Philosophers don't eat regularly, I said. Maids do. It was an easy choice. I turned from the window to face him. Tomorrow night, then. Midnight. Don't be late. I'm never late, he assured me. I left his chambers with my mind already working on the next problem. We had a plan to get him fed and strong, but the hunter Blackwood had hired was arriving tomorrow. We needed to know who he was, what methods he planned to use, and how to counter them. Which meant I needed to do something extremely foolish. I needed to meet the hunter myself. The next evening, I watched from a servant's alcove as a man in travel-stained leathers arrived at the palace gates. He had the look of a professional soldier. Hard eyes, scarred hands, weapons worn with comfortable familiarity. The guards escorted him not to the main entrance, but to a side door that led to the older wings of the palace, to the watchtower. I followed at a safe distance, using every trick I'd learned in 3 years of being invisible. The hunter was shown into the tower's lower chamber, where Lord Blackwood and Lady Ashford waited. I couldn't risk entering the main chamber, but I knew the tower's secrets. There was a narrow crawl space behind the walls, meant for maintenance access to the tower's ancient mechanisms. I'd explored it once, back when I first came to the palace. It took me 15 minutes to work my way around to the space behind the chamber where they met. Through gaps in the old stone, I could hear their voices clearly. "Reputation precedes you, Master Cray," Blackwood was saying. "They say you've killed 24 of the creatures." 37, the hunter's voice corrected, "if we're counting accurately. Though I'll confess, a royal kill would be a first for me. Higher risk, higher reward." "The reward will be substantial," Lady Ashford assured him. 10,000 crowns if you succeed. But you must make him reveal himself publicly. A private assassination accomplishes nothing for our purposes. "I understand the game," Cray said. "Discredit the monster before destroying it. You want him transformed and savage in front of witnesses, so there's no question about what he is." "Precisely," Blackwood agreed. "Can it be done?" "Any vampire can be driven to reveal itself," Cray said confidently. "It's simply a matter of proper preparation." They're slaves to blood hunger, to certain scents and sounds. I have methods. Some use an extract derived from vervain and wolfsbane, enhanced with other components. It inflames their darker nature, makes control nearly impossible. "At the Spring Festival, there will be hundreds attending," Lady Ashford said, "including several young noblewomen making their debut. Perhaps if one of them were to have an accident, something that draws blood, with your extract already affecting the prince." "He'd go into a frenzy," Cray finished. "Attack anything that moves. You'd have your proof and your monster all in one convenient display. Then I kill him, and everyone calls me a hero." The hunter chuckled. "I like the way you nobles think." "We'll need to ensure he's weakened beforehand," Blackwood said thoughtfully. "No feeding in the days leading up to the festival. I'll put word out that the dungeon is under quarantine. Anyone attempting to access it will be turned away." "What about his little maid?" Lady Ashford asked. "The one he's been meeting with. She could be helping him." My blood ran cold. "I've had her watched," Blackwood said. "She's nobody, a mouse of a girl who probably caught his attention for some passing fancy. Still, it wouldn't hurt to remove her from the equation. Can't have any surprises." "Leave her to me," Lady Ashford said, and the cold pleasure in her voice made my skin crawl. "I'll find some excuse to have her reassigned, or perhaps an accident in the kitchens. So easy for a clumsy maid to be burned by boiling water." They continued planning, but I'd heard enough. I worked my way back through the crawl space, my mind racing. They knew about me. Not the full extent of my involvement, but enough to mark me as a threat. I had to warn Adrian, had to tell him about the hunter's extract, about the plan to prevent him from feeding, about the trap they were setting at the festival. And we had to move up our timeline. Midnight couldn't come soon enough. When I met Prince Adrian at the watchtower's base, I was out of breath from running through the palace corridors. I'd nearly been caught twice by roving guards. "They know about me," I said immediately. "Not everything, but enough. Blackwood is going to try to have me removed or killed." Adrian's face darkened. "Then we get you out. Tonight. I can arrange—" "No," I interrupted. "If I disappear, they'll know we're aware of their plan. We lose our advantage. Besides, where would I go? I have no money, no connections. I'd be hunted down within a week." "I won't let them hurt you," he said fiercely. "Then we stick to the plan," I said. "We stay ahead of them. Come on, we're wasting time." I led him to a concealed entrance at the tower's base, hidden behind a tangle of wild roses that no one had trimmed in years. The passage beyond was exactly as I remembered, narrow, damp, and spiraling down into darkness. Adrian moved with perfect confidence in the dark. Vampire eyes, I supposed. I had to feel my way along the wall, trusting him to guide me when the path became treacherous. "Tell me about the festival," I said as we descended. "What usually happens?" "Dancing, feasting, public speeches," he said. "Father uses it to cement alliances and show the kingdom's prosperity. Marcus loves it, all that attention and adulation. I usually avoid it when I can. But this year you can't avoid it," I said. "Which they're counting on. They plan to use an extract, something derived from vervain and wolfsbane. The hunter called it a way to inflame your darker nature." "I've heard of such things," Adrian said quietly. "Hunters use them to flush out vampires who are hiding among humans. It affects us like a drug, loosening our control. Combined with the sight and smell of blood, you'd attack," I finished. "And they'd have their proof." "Yes." We walked in silence for a moment, the only sound our footsteps on stone and the distant dripping of water. "There has to be a way to counter it," I said. "Some kind of antidote or protection." "If there is, I don't know it," Adrian admitted. "My mother tried to teach me about our nature before she died, but I was so young. And after her death, there was no one to guide me. I've been learning through trial and error for 10 years. "What about others of your kind?" I asked. "Are there other vampires who might help?" He laughed bitterly. "The old bloodlines don't exactly welcome halflings like me. I'm not pure enough for their circles. And the turned vampires, those who were human once, they have their own communities that don't include nobility. I'm neither one thing nor the other. Alone, as always." The loneliness in his voice struck me. He was a prince, but he lived in complete isolation. Neither fully human nor fully vampire. neither trusted by his family nor accepted by his mother's kind. "You're not alone anymore," I said softly. "You have me." He stopped walking so abruptly I almost ran into him. In the darkness, I felt rather than saw him turn to face me. "Ilara," he said, and his voice was rough with emotion. "If this goes wrong at the festival, if I lose control, promise me you'll run. Promise me you won't try to help." "I can't promise that. Please." His hand found mine in the dark, cold fingers wrapping around my warmer ones. "I couldn't bear it if I hurt you, if I killed you while I was in that state. Promise me you'll save yourself." "Only if you promise the same," I said. "That if things go completely wrong, if there's no way to win, you'll save yourself, rather than letting them burn you in the square." "That's not." "It's exactly the same," I interrupted. "You're asking me to abandon you. I'm asking you to abandon me. We're both being hypocrites because we care about each other's survival more than our own." His laugh echoed off the stone walls, surprised and genuine. "When did you become so wise?" "I was always wise," I said. "You were just too noble to notice." I squeezed his hand. "Now come on." We have prisoners to visit and a conspiracy to foil. The passage opened into a forgotten section of the dungeon, far from the main cells. From here, we could access the condemned prisoners' wing without passing any guards. There were 3 prisoners scheduled for execution the next day, 2 thieves and a murderer. Adrian approached the first cell with visible reluctance. "I hate this," he said quietly. "Even knowing they're already condemned, even understanding it's necessary, I hate what I am." "What you are is a survivor," I said firmly. "You didn't ask for this curse. You didn't choose it. But you've chosen not to be a monster, despite every opportunity. That matters." He looked at me for a long moment, then nodded. "Stay here. You shouldn't watch this." But I did watch, through the barred window of the cell door. I watched him move with inhuman speed, watched the prisoner barely have time to gasp before Adrian's fangs were in his throat. It was over in seconds, faster and more merciful than the hangman's noose would have been. He emerged from the cell looking stronger, more vital. The shadows under his eyes had lessened, and there was color in his pale cheeks. "2 more," I said quietly. By the time had finished with all 3 condemned prisoners, Prince Adrian looked like a different person. Powerful, dangerous, beautiful in a way that made my heart race for reasons I didn't want to examine too closely. "How do you feel?" I asked as we made our way back through the passage. "Stronger," he admitted. "More in control. The hunger is quiet for the first time in weeks." He paused. "Thank you for bringing me here, for helping me." "We're partners," I reminded him, "though we still have the problem of Blackwood's quarantine. You won't be able to feed again before the festival. If I'm strong now, I can last 3 days, 4 at most. After that—" He trailed off, but we both knew what he meant. After that, the hunger would return with a vengeance. "Then we make sure the festival is resolved in 3 days," I said, "one way or another." We emerged from the passage near dawn. The sky was lightening to gray, and Adrian flinched at the approaching sunlight. "Go," I urged. "Get inside before the sun rises." "Will you be safe?" he asked. "Safer than you in daylight," I said. "Now go." He disappeared into the shadows with supernatural speed, and I was left alone in the growing dawn, thinking about everything we'd learned and everything we still needed to do. The next 2 days passed in a blur of preparation and information gathering. I learned that Lady Ashford had indeed arranged for my reassignment. I was to work in the scullery during the festival, far from the main events, a clear attempt to keep me away from Adrian. I also learned that Master Cray, the hunter, had been given quarters in the East Wing and was often seen consulting with the palace physician about herbs and medicines for the festival. The extract, I assumed. Adrian and I met each night in his chambers to strategize. He taught me what he knew about vampire weaknesses and strengths. I taught him about the servant networks in the palace and how information flowed through them. "The festival begins at sunset tomorrow," Adrian said on the second night. 3 hours of dancing and socializing before the feast. That's when they'll make their move. They'll want witnesses, but also need to isolate you enough to stage the incident, I reasoned. Probably during one of the dances, when you're in close proximity to the young noblewomen. "Father will insist I dance," Adrian said grimly. "He always does. It's expected." "Then we turn that to our advantage," I said, an idea forming. "What if you weren't dancing with a random noblewoman? What if you had a specific partner, someone you'd invited?" "The scandal would be enormous," Adrian said. "Princes don't invite common servants to festival dances." "Exactly," I said. "Everyone would be watching, wondering about the scandal. Blackwood would have a harder time engineering a private incident, and I'd be right there to help if something goes wrong." Adrian stared at me. "You want to attend the festival as my dance partner?" "I want to survive," I corrected, "and I want you to survive. This gives us the best chance. They're expecting you to be isolated and vulnerable. Instead, you'll be center stage with a partner who knows what's coming. Ilara, if you appear as my invited partner, you'll never have a quiet life again. The nobility will scrutinize everything about you, your past, your family, your intentions. They'll eat you alive." "Let them try," I said with more bravado than I felt. "I've survived 3 years in this palace. I can survive their gossip." He studied me for a long moment, and I saw the internal war playing out behind his eyes. The desire to protect me, warring with the recognition that my plan made sense. "There's something else," he said finally. "Something I haven't told you." My heart sank.
"What?"
"The spring festival commemorates my mother's death," he said quietly. "She died 10 years ago tomorrow. Some in the court still blame her for what she was. There are those who celebrate her death as the cleansing of a monster from the royal line." "And your father?" I asked gently. "Grieves in private and pretends in public," Adrian said. "He loved her, truly loved her, but he's a king first, and the kingdom could never know what she was. So he plays along with the fiction that she died of natural causes, and he watches as they turn her memory into propaganda." "I'm sorry," I said, and I meant it. "That must be agony for you both." "It's one of the reasons I've grown distant from him," Adrian admitted. "I can't stand the pretense, can't watch him smile and nod while they slander her memory." He looked at me with those ancient, pained eyes. "Tomorrow will be hard for me, harder than usual." The memories, the grief, it all comes back on this day. And if Blackwood's extract is added to that emotional state, then we make sure you're not alone for a single moment, I said firmly. From the moment the festival begins to the moment it ends, I stay by your side. We face this together. Your grief, their trap, all of it. "You truly mean to do this?" he said wonderingly. "Stand beside a vampire prince at a royal festival while conspirators plot our deaths and the entire court watches our every move?" "I truly do," I confirmed. "Though I'll need a dress. Can't exactly attend in my maid's uniform." "Despite everything," he laughed, "I'll arrange it. Something suitable, but not ostentatious. We want to intrigue them, not blind them with jewels." "I trust your judgment," I said. Then, more softly, "I trust you, Adrian." He crossed the room in an instant, taking my hands in his. "I trust you too, Ilara, more than I've trusted anyone since my mother died. You've become—" He paused, seeming to search for words. "Essential. In the span of just a few days, you've become essential to me." My breath caught. We were standing so close I could see the faint, inhuman glow in his eyes that emerged when he was emotional, could feel the unnatural cold radiating from his skin. And yet, I felt no fear, only a strange warmth spreading through my chest. Essential, I repeated. I like that word better than partner. So do I, he said softly. Then, seeming to catch himself, he stepped back. You should rest. Tomorrow will be dangerous. For both of us, I agreed. Don't face it alone, Adrian. Whatever happens, don't face it alone. I won't, he promised. Not anymore. The day of the spring festival dawned bright and clear, which everyone took as a good omen. I knew better. Clear skies meant Adrian would be weakened by sunlight for hours before the evening festivities began. Mrs. Thornberry was surprised when I was called away from scullery duty by a royal messenger.
His Highness, Prince Adrian, requests your presence in his chambers, the messenger said stiffly. Immediately. The other servants stared as I left, their whispers following me through the corridors. By nightfall, the entire palace would be buzzing with speculation. Part of me was terrified by the attention, but another part, a part I was just beginning to recognize, felt a fierce satisfaction. For once, I was seen. I mattered. Adrian's chambers had been transformed. A dress lay on his bed, deep midnight blue silk with silver embroidery, elegant but not overly lavish. Next to it, silver combs for my hair and a simple sapphire pendant. "They're my mother's," Adrian said, appearing from his dressing room. He looked pale, and I could see the effort it took him to remain standing in the sunlight streaming through the windows. She would have wanted someone to wear them, someone worthy. "I'm not worthy of a queen's jewelry," I protested. "You're worthy of far more than that," he said quietly. "Ilara, before tonight begins, I need to tell you something. If this goes wrong, if I lose control, I want you to know—" "Don't," I interrupted. "Don't say goodbye. We're not done yet. I know, but just in case." He took my hands, and despite the sunlight weakening him, his grip was steady. "You've given me something I thought I'd lost forever. Hope. The possibility of a future that isn't just survival. Whatever happens tonight, thank you for that." I wanted to tell him that he'd done the same for me, that for the first time since my brother's death, I felt alive again. But the words stuck in my throat, too big and too frightening to speak aloud. Instead, I squeezed his hands and said, "Help me with this dress. We have a festival to survive." By evening, I barely recognized myself in the mirror. The dress fit perfectly, the silver embroidery catching the lamplight like stars. The combs swept my brown hair into an elegant style I'd never worn before. The sapphire pendant rested against my collarbone, cool and heavy. "You look like a princess," Adrian said softly, and there was something in his voice that made my heart race. "I look like a fraud," I said, "a maid in borrowed finery." "You look like exactly who you are," he corrected. "Someone extraordinary pretending to be ordinary. But tonight, no more pretending." The festival was held in the palace's grand ballroom, a space I'd cleaned 100 times but never entered as a guest. Crystal chandeliers cast prismatic light across marble floors. Musicians played in the gallery above. Nobles in their finest clothes clustered in glittering groups, their laughter and conversation a constant hum beneath the music. When Prince Adrian entered with me on his arm, the entire room fell silent. I had expected whispers, I had expected stares, but the sheer weight of hundreds of eyes fixing on us simultaneously was almost physical. I felt naked despite the dress, exposed despite the crowd. "Breathe," Adrian murmured. "You belong here just as much as any of them." "That's a lie, but I appreciate it," I whispered back. King Edmund and Crown Prince Marcus stood on the dais at the far end of the ballroom. The king's expression was unreadable. Marcus looked furious. "Adrian," the king called out, "a word, if you please." Adrian's hand tightened on my arm, then released. "Wait here," he said softly. I watched him cross the ballroom floor, nobles parting before him like water. He moved with casual grace despite the weakness I knew he was fighting. The sunlight during the day had taken its toll, and the hunger was returning early. I could see it in the tension of his shoulders, the careful control of every movement. Lord Blackwood emerged from the crowd nearly, his smile cold and calculated. "My dear girl," he said, "what an unexpected development. His Highness has never brought a companion to a festival before." "Perhaps he was waiting for the right companion," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "Or perhaps he's grown desperate enough to seek company anywhere he can find it." Blackwood's eyes glittered. "One wonders what a prince could want with a common maid." "One could," I suggested, "if one had the courage to question a prince directly." Lady Ashford joined us, her expression falsely sweet. "You do clean up nicely, dear. Though I can't help but think you'd be more comfortable in the servants' hall. This world isn't meant for your kind." "Funny," I said, meeting her gaze directly. "I was thinking the same thing about you. All this pageantry and pretense, it must be exhausting, maintaining the facade of nobility while plotting murder in watchtowers." Her expression froze. Blackwood's hand moved toward his belt where I suspected he carried a blade. "Careful, girl," he said softly. "Accidents happen at these festivals. So many people, so much confusion. A clumsy servant could easily tumble from a balcony." "Could," I agreed, "though I imagine the scandal would be enormous if Prince Adrian's invited companion were to die under suspicious circumstances. People might start asking uncomfortable questions." Before Blackwood could respond, Adrian returned. His father and brother followed behind him, and I could see from Adrian's expression that the conversation had not gone well. "Elara," Adrian said, offering his arm. "Shall we dance?" I took his arm gratefully, letting him lead me to the dance floor as the musicians began a waltz. Around us, other couples took their positions, but I felt their stares like brands. "Father is displeased," Adrian murmured as we began to move. "He wants to know my intentions toward you." "And what did you tell him?" "The truth, that you're under my protection, and anyone who harms you answers to me." His hand was cold through the thin silk of my dress. "He's worried about scandal. Marcus is delighted. He thinks I'm making a fool of myself." "And Blackwood, he spun me carefully. Blackwood is watching us like a hawk watching mice." "He threatened me," I said quietly. "Implied I might have an accident." Adrian's eyes flashed crimson for just a moment before he controlled himself. "Breathe," I said, using his earlier advice. "Stay in control. That's what they want, for you to lose control." He nodded, focusing on the dance. He moved beautifully, each step precise despite his weakening state. I, who had never danced a formal waltz in my life, followed as best I could, grateful for his steady guidance. "You're doing perfectly," he said softly, "better than half these nobles who've been training since childhood. I'm terrified I'll step on your feet. Then you'll step on my feet. It won't be the worst thing to happen tonight." We danced through 2 more songs, and gradually the stares became less intense. Other scandals drew attention: Lord Wesley's new mistress, Lady Hertford's scandalous dress, the ongoing feud between the merchant houses. We were still being watched, but no longer the sole focus of attention. That's when I saw Master Cray. He stood near the refreshment tables, dressed like a minor noble in dark green velvet, but I recognized his hard eyes, the way he moved like a predator among prey. and I saw him add something to one of the wine glasses on the servant's tray. "Adrian," I said quietly, "the hunter, he's poisoning the wine." Adrian followed my gaze. "Which glass?" "I don't know. He poisoned one, but the tray has dozens." I watched as a servant began carrying the tray toward us. "If you drink any of them—" "The extract," Adrian finished grimly, "combined with my weakened state from the sun, I'd lose control within minutes." The servant was getting closer. In moments, he'd offer us the poisoned wine, and we'd have no way of knowing which glass was tainted. "We need to—" I began, but Adrian was already moving.
He accidentally stumbled, reaching for my arm as if to steady himself, but instead bumping into a passing noble. That noble stumbled into another, who bumped the servant with the tray. Wine glasses crashed to the floor in a spectacular cascade of crystal and red liquid. "My apologies," Adrian said loudly. "How clumsy of me. The sun today was quite intense. I'm afraid I'm feeling somewhat faint." It was brilliant. He destroyed the tainted wine while giving himself an excuse to appear weakened. Master Cray, watching from across the room, scowled. But the hunter had backup plans. I saw it in his expression, saw him exchange glances with Lady Ashford. This was just the opening salvo. "We should get you some air," I said, playing along. "The terrace?" "Good idea," Adrian agreed. We made our way through the crowd toward the terrace stores. Behind us, I heard Blackwood's voice rise above the music. "Is the prince unwell? Perhaps he's overexerted himself. Or perhaps the company he's keeping is proving unsuitable." The jab was clear, meant to embarrass both Adrian and myself. But Adrian simply smiled tightly and continued walking. The terrace was blissfully empty and cooler than the overheated ballroom. Adrian leaned against the stone railing, his breathing somewhat labored. "The hunger is getting worse," he admitted quietly. "Being around so many people, so many heartbeats, it's taking everything I have to maintain control." "How much longer can you last?" "An hour, maybe 2. After that—" He didn't need to finish. "Then we need to force their hand," I said. "Make them act before you weaken further." "How?" I thought quickly, pieces clicking into place. "They want you to attack someone publicly, to prove you're a monster. What if we give them what they want, but on our terms?" "Ilara, I can't attack someone just to—" "Not really attack," I interrupted. "Stage it. Make it look like you're losing control, but actually maintain enough control to avoid real harm. Then, when Cray comes to save the victim, we expose him as the hunter he is, reveal the conspiracy in front of everyone." Adrian stared at me. "That's insane." "Yes," I agreed, "but so is everything else we've done, and it's the only way to win. If we just try to avoid their traps all night, eventually they'll succeed. But if we spring the trap ourselves, we control what happens." He was silent for a long moment, considering. Then, "We'd need someone to be the victim, someone who'd trust me enough not to panic when I apparently attack them." "Me," I said simply. "It has to be me." "Absolutely not. If something goes wrong, if I actually hurt you—" "You won't," I said, with confidence I didn't entirely feel. "You've had 100 opportunities to hurt me, and you never have. Even when you were starving, even when you were desperate, you have more control than they give you credit for." "This is different," Adrian protested. "This would be playing at losing control, deliberately letting the hunger rise. Ilara, I could kill you in seconds if the beast takes over." "Then don't let it take over," I said. "You're stronger than you think. I've seen it. You're not the monster they claim you are." He looked at me with such intensity that I felt it like a physical touch. "You have entirely too much faith in me. Or you have too little faith in yourself," I countered. "This is how we win, Adrian. This is how we survive."
Before he could respond, the terrace doors burst open. Crown Prince Marcus strode out, flanked by guards. "There you are," Marcus said coldly. "Father wants you back inside, now. Apparently, your little display with the wine has caused concern." "I'm not feeling well," Adrian said, his voice steady despite his weakness. "I'll return shortly." "You'll return now," Marcus snapped, "and your companion will remain here. This has gone far enough, Adrian. You're embarrassing the entire royal family." "I'm embarrassing you," Adrian corrected. "Because for once, I'm not playing your games or living in your shadow." Marcus's face flushed red. "You dare?" "I dare quite a lot," Adrian said, echoing his words from our staged argument days before, "including choosing my own companions and living my own life. Now, if you'll excuse us." He took my arm and tried to push past Marcus, but the guards blocked our path. "I said she stays," Marcus growled. "Guards, escort the young woman to the servants' quarters. Make sure she understands she's no longer welcome at royal functions." The guards reached for me, and I saw Adrian's control waver. His eyes flashed crimson. His hand moved toward the nearest guard with inhuman speed. "Stop," I said quickly, putting myself between Adrian and the guards. "It's fine, I'll go." "Ilara," Adrian's voice was strained. "It's fine," I repeated, meeting his eyes. "This isn't the time." I could see the war in his expression, fury at his brother, desperation to protect me, and fear of losing control right here in front of witnesses. This wasn't how we'd planned it, but maybe it could work. As the guards took my arms to escort me away, I caught Adrian's eye and mouthed 2 words: 1 hour. His slight nod told me he understood. The guards were less than gentle as they marched me through the palace corridors. We passed clusters of servants who stared with a mixture of sympathy and schadenfreude. The nobody maid who tried to rise above her station being put back in her place. But instead of taking me to the servants' quarters as ordered, the guards veered toward a different part of the palace. The East Wing, Lord Blackwood's territory. "Where are we going?" I demanded. "Prince Marcus said." "Lord Blackwood has other orders," one guard said grimly. They pushed me into a small, windowless room that might once have been a storage space. Before I could protest, they'd shut the door and locked it from outside. I was trapped. I pounded on the door, shouted for help, but no one came. The room was soundproofed, probably why they'd chosen it. How long before Adrian realized something was wrong? How long before he came looking for me? "An hour," I told him. We had planned to stage our confrontation in an hour, but now I was imprisoned, unable to help, unable to warn him if Blackwood accelerated his plans. I forced myself to think calmly. The room was small, but not empty. Old furniture covered in dust sheets, broken picture frames, a trunk of what looked like old clothes. Nothing immediately useful as a weapon or escape tool. But then I noticed something. A ventilation grate high on one wall. It was small, probably too small for an adult to fit through, but it connected to the palace's old air circulation system. If I could reach it, I could at least hear what was happening in nearby rooms. Might even be able to call for help. I dragged the trunk beneath the grate and climbed up. The grate was rusted, but not impossible to remove. It took several minutes of working the old screws loose with the edge of a picture frame, but finally it came free.